There's something most men never understand, and it's the reason they feel ignored, replaced, or overlooked, no matter how much effort they put in. They do everything right. They show up, they give attention, they stay loyal. They try to be consistent, respectful, and genuine. And yet, something still doesn't click. Here's the truth most people won't say out loud. Attraction isn't built on effort alone. It's built on how you are perceived. Because people don't respond to what you mean, they respond to what your behavior signals. And the moment you become too available, too predictable, or too easy to access, you stop being a challenge. And when the challenge disappears, so does the attraction. Not because you're not valuable, but because you're being perceived the wrong way. So the real question isn't, how do I do more? It's, how do I become someone who is naturally valued, not overlooked? Because once you understand this, you'll never look at attraction the same way again. The illusion that blinds most men. Most men don't fail because they're doing the wrong things. They fail because they're operating under the wrong assumption. They believe attraction works like effort, that if they just give more, show more, prove more, then eventually they'll be valued more. So they try harder, they become more available. They double down on attention. They think, if I just stay consistent, if I just keep showing her I care, it will work. But instead of building attraction, they slowly lose it. And that's where confusion begins, because everything they were told says the opposite. Be a good man. Treat her right. Give your best. And while those things matter in life, they don't automatically create attraction. Why? Because attraction doesn't respond to intention, it responds to perception. There's a pattern most men never notice. The more predictable you become, the less interesting you feel. The more available you are, the less value you seem to have. Not because you're actually worth less, but because your behavior signals that you are easy to access. And anything that is too easy to access loses its sense of importance. Think about it. The things you value most are rarely the things you can get instantly. They require effort, they require patience, they require some level of uncertainty. That uncertainty is key, because uncertainty creates curiosity, and curiosity is what keeps someone mentally engaged. Without it, interest fades. So when a man becomes overly available, always responding, always initiating, always adjusting his life to stay connected, he unknowingly removes that uncertainty. And in doing so, he removes the very tension that creates attraction. Now here's the part most men struggle with. This doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like effort. It feels like being a good person. So when the outcome doesn't match the effort, they don't question the strategy. They question themselves. I need to try harder. I need to be better. I need to give more. But what if the issue isn't effort? What if it's how that effort is being perceived? Because a man can give from two completely different places, from abundance or from need. From abundance, his actions feel grounded. From need, his actions feel heavy. And people can feel that difference, even if they can't explain it. One signals choice, the other signals dependence. And dependence quietly shifts how a man is seen. Not instantly, but gradually. Until the dynamic changes, and he doesn't understand why. This is the illusion, believing that more effort always leads to more value. When in reality, effort without awareness can reduce how that effort is perceived. And once you see this pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. Men giving more, but being valued less. Trying harder, but feeling less chosen. Not because they lack value, but because they're communicating it in a way that doesn't reflect it. And that's where everything begins to shift. Why effort doesn't always create attraction? Once you understand the illusion, the next question becomes unavoidable. If effort isn't the answer, what actually creates attraction? This is where most men get stuck, because they try to solve attraction with logic. But attraction doesn't follow logic, it follows signals. Every action you take communicates something, whether you intend it or not. The way you respond, how quickly you reply, how you handle space, how you carry yourself under pressure, all of it forms a picture in someone else's mind. And that picture is what determines how you are perceived. Not your intentions, not your effort, your signals. There's a crucial distinction most men miss. Two men can perform the exact same action, but be perceived completely differently. One gives attention from a place of abundance. The other gives attention from a place of need. On the surface, the behavior looks identical, but the underlying energy is not, and people are remarkably sensitive to that difference. A man who gives from abundance signals, "I choose this." A man who gives from need signals, "I depend on this." And that distinction changes everything. Because attraction isn't built on access, it's built on perceived independence. When a man centers his actions around getting a response, he subtly communicates that the response defines him. And when that happens, his position weakens, not because of what he does, but because of how it's interpreted. Now consider the opposite. A man who remains engaged with his own life, who moves with direction, who does not wait for validation to act, naturally creates a different kind of presence. Not louder, not more aggressive, just more grounded. And that grounded presence creates something powerful: space. And space allows others to think, wonder, and feel curiosity. Without space, everything becomes predictable. And predictability removes tension. Without tension, there is no curiosity. And without curiosity, attraction has nothing to hold on to. This is where most men unknowingly collapse the dynamic. They try to eliminate distance by increasing closeness, more messages, more availability, more consistency, more effort. But in doing so, they remove the very contrast that keeps interest alive. Because attraction requires contrast, closeness and distance, presence and space, engagement and restraint, not extremes, but balance. When everything is constantly available, nothing stands out. But when presence is selective, intentional, and balanced, it carries weight. Machiavelli observed this principle through power. Those who control access control perception. Those who control perception influence outcomes. In modern terms, this translates into something simple. You don't build attraction by increasing effort alone. You build it by controlling how your effort is perceived, because perception, not effort, determines value. And once you understand that, you stop trying to prove yourself through more action, and start shaping how your actions are experienced. That's the shift most men never make. And it's the difference between being overlooked and being recognized without forcing it. The signals that create attraction. Attraction isn't random. It's not something that just happens. It's the result of signals, consistent, subtle cues that shape how you are perceived over time. Most men focus on words, but words are the least important part of the equation. People don't evaluate what you say nearly as much as they evaluate how you behave. Every interaction communicates something: how you handle uncertainty, how you respond to distance, how you manage your time, how you treat your own priorities. These aren't just actions, they are signals of who you are, and people respond to those signals instinctively, not logically, instinctively. 1. Direction creates presence. A man with direction carries weight in his presence. Why? Because direction implies momentum. It suggests that his life is moving forward with or without external validation. This creates a subtle but powerful effect. He is not waiting, he is not paused, he is not orbiting someone else's attention. He is progressing. And that progression naturally draws interest, because people are attracted to motion, growth, and purpose. A man without direction, on the other hand, becomes reactive. He adjusts himself based on external input. He follows instead of leads. And over time, that shift changes how he is perceived. 2. Emotional control signals. Stability. Emotional control is not about suppressing feelings. It's about managing them with awareness. A man who reacts impulsively signals instability. A man who remains composed signals reliability. And reliability is rare. When someone senses that you are not easily shaken, not easily influenced, not easily pulled off center, they feel a sense of grounding around you. That presence is felt more than it is seen, and it creates a level of respect that doesn't require explanation. 3. Boundaries. Defined value boundaries are not about pushing people away. They are about defining where you stand. Without boundaries, behavior becomes inconsistent. With boundaries, behavior becomes clear, and clarity creates structure. When someone knows what is acceptable and what isn't, they understand how to engage with you. But when there are no limits, behavior becomes careless, not because people are malicious, but because there is no reason to adjust. Boundaries create awareness, and awareness creates respect. 4. Controlled availability. Builds interest. Availability, when uncontrolled, removes tension, and without tension, there is no engagement. When everything is always accessible, it stops feeling meaningful. But when access is selective, it gains significance. This is not about withdrawing or playing games, it's about understanding timing. Presence that is constant becomes background noise. Presence that is intentional becomes noticeable. And what is noticeable is what gets attention. 5. Independence commands attention. Independence is one of the most powerful signals a man can carry. Not because it isolates him, but because it stabilizes him. A man who is dependent seeks validation. A man who is independent creates value from within. And that internal stability reflects outwardly. It changes how he speaks, how he moves, how he reacts, and ultimately, how he is perceived. Independence communicates a simple message. I am not here to be completed. I am already building something. That message alone changes dynamics without a single word being spoken. The key insight here is simple, but powerful. Attraction is not built through isolated actions. It is built through consistent signals over time. And those signals shape perception, not instantly, but undeniably. Once you understand this, you stop trying to impress. You start aligning your behavior with the version of yourself you want others to experience. And that is where real influence begins. Why too much availability kills attraction? There's a point where good intentions begin to work against you. It happens quietly. A man starts off grounded, focused on his own life, his own direction. Then, gradually, something shifts. He becomes more responsive, more accessible, more flexible. Not because he loses value, but because he begins to center his behavior around maintaining connection. And without realizing it, the dynamic changes. When someone is always available, always reachable, always ready to respond, they stop creating anticipation. And without anticipation, there is no pull, because attraction needs space to exist. Space creates tension. Tension creates curiosity. Curiosity keeps attention alive. But when everything is immediate, nothing is left to be discovered, and discovery is what sustains interest. Most men make a critical assumption. If I stay present, I'll stay important. But presence without boundaries does the opposite. It normalizes access, and what is normal becomes overlooked, not ignored out of disrespect, but simply because it blends into the background. Human attention naturally prioritizes contrast. What stands out gets noticed. What is constant gets filtered out. There's also a deeper layer most men don't see. When you adjust your availability around someone else, you are no longer operating from your own rhythm. You are reacting. And reactive behavior shifts perception, because it signals that your time is flexible in a way that isn't self-directed, and anything that lacks self-direction loses weight in how it's perceived. The man who maintains control over his availability sends a different signal entirely. Not by being distant, not by being unpredictable for the sake of it, but by having structure. He is engaged, but not consumed. Present, but not excessive. Available, but not at the expense of his own direction. And that balance creates something subtle, yet powerful. Respect without effort. Interest without pursuit. There's a simple truth at work here. People assign value based on how something is accessed. If it's always available, it becomes expected. If it's selectively available, it becomes valued. This principle applies far beyond relationships, but in attraction, it's especially pronounced, because emotional engagement requires contrast, and contrast only exists when there is something to compare against. This is where many men unknowingly lose ground. They try to increase closeness to build connection, but in doing so, they eliminate the space that allows connection to grow. They replace tension with certainty, and certainty removes curiosity. A stronger approach is not to withdraw, but to align, to ensure that your time, energy, and attention are not given impulsively, but intentionally. Because when your behavior reflects direction, your presence carries weight. And when your presence carries weight, it doesn't need to be forced, it is felt. The difference is subtle, but decisive. One approach tries to earn attention through constant availability. The other earns it by maintaining structure, self-direction, and balance. And in the long run, only one of those approaches sustains interest: the power of boundaries and respect. At some point, every man encounters the same realization. Not everyone responds to effort the way he expects. Some people will take more than they give. Some will push limits, and some will test what they can get away with. This isn't a flaw in others, it's a reflection of human behavior. People naturally explore boundaries, not out of disrespect, but out of instinct. They are always asking, consciously or not, how far can this go? The difference between being respected and being overlooked often comes down to one thing: how you respond. Because behavior doesn't change based on words, it changes based on consequences. If there are no consequences, there is no reason to adjust. And when there is no adjustment, patterns continue. Unchanged, unquestioned. A common mistake is believing that explaining your standards will make others respect them. But clarity alone is not enough. A boundary that is not reinforced has no weight. It exists only as a statement, not as a standard. And people quickly recognize that distinction. Now consider two approaches. In the first, a man expresses what he expects. But when those expectations are crossed, nothing happens. He continues as before. He maintains the same behavior. He avoids conflict. And in doing so, he teaches a silent lesson: my boundaries do not require respect. In the second, a man operates differently. His expectations are clear. But more importantly, his response is consistent. When something crosses a line, he adjusts, not emotionally, not impulsively, but decisively. He changes access, he redefines the interaction, and the message becomes unmistakable. Respect is not optional. This shift does something important. It removes ambiguity, and ambiguity invites testing. Clarity removes it. Respect is not demanded, it is observed, and it is reinforced through behavior, not explanation. This is where many men unknowingly give away their position. They tolerate more than they should. They explain more than necessary. They stay where they shouldn't. And over time, that tolerance shapes how they are perceived. Because people don't just learn who you are. They learn what you allow. Boundaries are not about control. They are about definition. They define your standards. They define your limits. They define how others are allowed to interact with you. And once those definitions are clear, everything changes. Because now interactions are no longer guesswork. They are structured, predictable in expectation, and accountable in outcome. There is a quiet strength in this approach. It doesn't rely on force. It doesn't rely on confrontation. It relies on consistency, and consistency builds credibility. Attraction, respect, and value all respond to the same principle. What is protected is valued. What is unprotected is tested. And what is tested repeatedly without consequence is eventually taken for granted. The man who understands this does not react to every situation. He doesn't chase validation. He doesn't over-explain his position. He simply maintains it. And over time, that steadiness becomes unmistakable. Because in the end, respect is not something you request. It is something you signal through your standards, through your responses, and through what you are willing and unwilling to accept. Independence, the hidden source of power. There is a quiet difference between men who are noticed and men who are remembered. It is not appearance, not status, not even confidence in the way most people think of it. It is independence. Independence is not about isolation. It is about ownership. Ownership of your time, your direction, your decisions, your life. A man who is independent does not move to fill a gap. He moves with intent. He is not waiting for permission. He is not adjusting himself to be accepted. He is operating from his own center. And that creates a very specific perception. He is not available to be completed by someone else. He is already in motion. This matters because people are naturally drawn to what is already in motion. Momentum signals progress. Progress signals direction, and direction signals value. Contrast that with dependence. When a man begins to rely on another person for his sense of direction, his behavior shifts, his priorities shift, his focus shifts, and gradually his identity becomes tied to the response of someone else. That is where perception changes. Not because he becomes less capable, but because he begins to appear as if his stability depends on external validation, and anything that appears dependent loses influence. Independence communicates something powerful without a single word. I am not waiting for life to define me. I am defining it myself. This is where many men unknowingly weaken their position. They begin to orbit someone else's attention. They center decisions around maintaining connection. They adjust their behavior to preserve access. But in doing so, they quietly step away from themselves. And when a man steps away from his own life, he becomes less compelling within it. Independence restores that center. It brings the focus back, not in a rigid or isolated way, but in a structured, self-directed way. A man with independence still engages, he still connects, he still participates, but he does so without losing himself in the process. There is a distinct difference between being part of something and being defined by it. Independence ensures that distinction remains clear, and when that clarity is present, something subtle begins to happen. Your presence changes, not because you are trying to appear different, but because your foundation is stable. You are no longer reacting to maintain position. You are moving from one that is already secure. This is what creates depth, because depth is not created through effort alone. It is created through alignment. When a man is aligned with his own direction, he no longer needs to chase significance. He carries it through how he lives, and that is what others feel. Not something said, but something demonstrated. In the end, independence is not about distance from others. It is about closeness to yourself. Because when a man is anchored in his own life, he becomes someone who does not need to be chosen to feel complete. And that, more than anything else, changes how he is perceived. If this message made you reflect, take a moment and comment the word "aware" below. Your perspective matters, and it shows you're thinking differently. If you want more content like this, focused on mindset, self-respect, and becoming the best version of yourself, subscribe to the channel. More insights are coming. Stay ready.